All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is the March chapter meeting of the San Fernando Valley chapter of Climate Reality Project. Whether you're joining us for the first time tonight or you join us every month, we are glad you could make it here tonight to hear about Passive House. We are very excited about our presentation tonight. Before we get started, though, I would like to begin, as we usually do, with our land acknowledgement. And tonight's land acknowledgement will be read by Andrew Ellis, who is a partner of ours from the LA chapter. He's actually one of the founding members of the LA chapter. He's a senior member of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps. He was trained back in 2013, so has been a climate reality leader for going on 12, 13 years now. Has trained a lot of other people. He's currently the legislative committee co-chair for the Los Angeles chapter. And he also worked as a professional environmental scientist, doing work with the EPA and other organizations, analyzing contaminated industrial sites and things like that. So he has a long career in this kind of work and in working towards improving improving things related to climate change and industrial pollution. I admire his work quite a bit, and we're glad to have him here tonight to read our land acknowledgement. Andrew, would you go ahead and unmute?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Sharon. A land acknowledgement is our formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists currently between us Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. We'd also like to acknowledge the history that has brought us to reside on this land, the colonialism that is present within our society and our current systems, and it calls on us to be mindful of our own present participation in it. We acknowledge that we here in the San Fernando Valley are on the traditional territory of what is considered the Tongva, Keys, Tataviam, and Chumash people. And we would like to acknowledge that they're our partners in this, and they will continue to be our partners in this. And we need to do everything in our work to include this concept of a land acknowledgement in everything that we do in acts and deeds. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Sharon, for our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Andrew. And you're right, it's not just the words we read at the beginning of the meeting, but needs to be present in all of our actions. If anyone here is calling in from outside the San Fernando Valley, you are welcome to enter the name of the tribes that were local in your area in the chat so that we can acknowledge those as well. Next, I would like to hand it off to our outreach coordinator, Vivian. Vivian, are you here? Can you unmute?
I'm here and I am unmuted. It's a good
There you are.
So many little squares on your screen that you can't find me. That's a good thing. So I want to welcome everyone, and especially people that this is your first meeting, and I hope you'll love it, and I hope you'll want to come back and be part of us. And I want to, as I always do a special invitation to become official member of our chapter.
For everybody.
You're all going to be on our email list, but to be member of the chapter, you become member of the larger Climate Reality, which spans the globe and has all kinds of amazing things happening. Climate Reality, I'm sure everyone knows, was founded by Vice President Al Gore, and he's an amazing leader, and it's really great to be connected to the bigger Climate Reality. So I'm putting a link in the chat. Just click on that and just fill out as the chapter in the form that link takes you to, that you're part of the San Fernando Valley chapter. And among other things, if you haven't done the Climate Reality training, you will get information about that. And that's amazing also.
So at this point, we are going to hand things over to our speakers, and I'm going to ask Kathy Schaefer to give them an introduction so that we can hear a little bit about where they came from.
Okay, thank you. We are very excited to have two excellent speakers tonight. We have Robert Haw, who is a physicist by training, a graduate of Stanford University, and retired from JPL in 2022 after 35 years as an interplanetary navigator. I'm impressed. He founded the Pasadena Foothills chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby and Pasadena 100, which is a group that promotes 100% carbon-free energy. Currently, he is a Passive House consultant and leads the building decarbonization team for Climate Action California. He wrote a proposal for a Passive House bill, and I'm going to tell you all, there is an action alert that I need you all to listen to now, because Rob's bill, it's a big deal to write a bill proposal and actually have a legislator pick up your bill and run it through the legislature. So Rob's bill is now working its way through the state legislature. We would love if you all call your state assembly member. If you don't know who you are, I'll help you figure it out. Call your state assembly member and ask that person to support AB 368. AB 368, and I'll put it all in the chat for you, because it's so exciting and we need to support these great people and this great project. So that's Rob. We are also very happy to have Brownyn Barry, who is a licensed architect with cross-platform experience in product, software, organization, and building design. She's focused on high-performance, data-driven outcomes and is an author of numerous white papers on Passive House-related topics. Brownyn is a co-founder of Passive House California and the Passive House Network, where she served as board president. She contributes to many ongoing policy-related efforts aimed at promoting policy-related efforts aimed at promoting outcomes-based energy and building codes. So thank you very much, and we welcome them.
For everyone in the audience, if you have questions as the presentation goes along, please type them into the chat and we will ask them at the end of the presentations.
Thank you so much for that very nice introduction, Kathy. Let me just correct a wee correction, though. It wasn't just me writing that bill. Brownyn and the team that we have formed to usher this bill through all wrote the bill, or all contributed to bringing this bill forward. So not just me. And I bet you all thought maybe you were coming to just hear about Passive House tonight. But in fact, we are trying to address a much larger issue than that. We don't want to settle for anything less than the transformation of the building industry in California. We want to see greenhouse gas emissions dropped as low as we can get them. And that would happen with this transformation. So that's why we are suggesting to add Passive House into Title 24. So we have a, next, please. Yeah, so here's our agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background, which you're all very familiar with, I'm pretty sure, the climate context. And that's what I'll talk about. And then I'll introduce some of the Passive House principles. And then I'll hand it off to Brownyn. And Brownyn will talk about Passive House projects in California. And then we'll go into our policy work that's going on. And as Kathy mentioned, we'll mention what AB 368 is all about. So to start off, here's one of the villains tonight. I'm sure you know what this is. Next, let's just go. So here's this villain's MO, and I'm sure you've all seen this graph many times before too. So this shows carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere for around the last million years, 800,000 years to be specific. And it's often observed that the highest carbon dioxide concentration during all that time was 300 parts per million. But that was around 400,000 years ago. That was well before any humans modern humans showed up on the scene. So, you know, the background level was roughly around 250 parts per million over all of that time. You know, as you can see, we're up at 419 now. It's not so important what the numbers themselves are. It's just that proportional difference. So it's about, you know, we're about 1.6 times higher than that background level. And it's nothing that humans have ever really, you know, lived with as a species. But here's the supervillain of tonight. This clathrate is a visible manifestation of methane, and it's called methane hydrate. It's a paraffin-like substance which exists in very cold, high-pressure conditions like the floor of the Arctic Ocean. Next. Yeah. So this is methane concentration in the atmosphere. And all I want to point out here, again, for around the last million years, and again, you can see very stable levels, you know, a little bit of a periodicity there, but until the industrial era began, and now it's rising very quickly. And what I just want to point this out, and just click to the next one now. What I just want to point out is that the level of rise of methane is very disproportionate to what we saw with carbon dioxide. So we're facing serious enough risks from all the projections from CO2 increases in our atmosphere. But methane is very serious, and you can see its level is rising much faster. Next slide, please. And that's because, as you probably also are aware, the global warming potential of methane is 84 times that of carbon dioxide over the time of interest that matters to us. So gas leaks, methane in cities are ubiquitous. And the leaks are prevalent enough to pose a significant risk to climate stability. Okay, it's as dangerous as burning coal. That you know, all the forecasts we get from CO2 entering our atmosphere with methane is contributing just as much a risk. Let's go to the next slide. Just, you know, fracking sites, they have storage containers. They're constantly leaking methane. This is an infrared photograph. Next one. And then here, this is an echo sounder image of methane bubbles escaping from the clathrates on the ocean floor and bubbling to the surface. So that rate of increase of methane release from the floor is increasing significantly as the Arctic Ocean warms. So this is a distribution of summertime temperatures in the Northern Hemisphere. And you can see on the left, that sort of grayish distribution, that's 50s through the 1980. And that distribution there, you can see the right-hand tail of it, where what used to be considered hot back in the, quote, good old days, perhaps for many of us on this call, we can call it that, you can see that it is now just an average temperature of this distribution from 2013 to 2023. So just click to the next one, and you can see the advance. So there's the advance in the average from the baseline, if we call the 51 to 80 distribution. So we now have warmed significantly, and now we have these extremely hot tails over on the right. And that's what we have to be aware of. So next slide, please, just so we can get a... So now we have these extreme heat waves that are occurring. Half of this extra heating is attributed to methane in the atmosphere. And as those levels increase, we're going to still move to the right with those tails, and heat waves are going to become hotter and hotter as we continue to increase those concentrations. So, 40 years ago, extreme temperatures like we're experiencing now, occasionally in the LA metro area, they were unheard of. I mean, those were Death Valley temperatures. So if you're still lucky enough, or maybe unlucky enough, to be around in 2050, don't be surprised at heat wave highs around 135 degrees. Now, that's not just a wag. That's a back of the envelope calculation, not a rigorous calculation, but there is some analysis at that. And so is California's building code ready for temperatures like that? So the shorthand term for the California building code is Title 24. And to get a building permit, buildings have to undergo energy simulations. And those simulations have to employ a typical meteorological year, or a TMY. It's a file, a weather file. But it's a collection. It's an average climate conditions from historical data. So even now, past data is being used for predicting performance of buildings that are intended to last the next 60, 80, 100 years. So okay, this is just a typical TMI weather file. Very complicated. Next. So these TMY files do not represent future weather. We need to design for resiliency over the building's lifetime. Energy simulations must incorporate future weather conditions, and the California Code does not require this. So now passive house, there's a toolbox with that tool set that includes an option for future weather. And you can just see an example here I have. This is from Burbank. On the left is this so-called TMY file. And then you can adjust it by increasing the mean temperature in the passive house toolbox. Now that's only increasing the mean. It's not extending out those tails, but this is at least a step in the right direction. And this is especially important because when you use the Title 24 procedure, it's just a black box. You just stick in all of the inputs that you're told to put in, and then something just emerges from the end. With passive house is much more user-friendly and flexible, and the user has those requirements, can adjust those inputs. Anyway, so what's so special about passive house? In California, passive houses use 50 to 70% less energy than baseline homes. That's achievable by following 5 principles. Okay, so let's super insulate. You super insulate walls, floor, and ceiling. So much so that in the winter, the house can be heated with nothing more than a hairdryer. And by including future weather in their design, passive house offers even more cooling load reduction in the summer than it would get otherwise. So then another principle is installing high quality windows and adding shading where needed. Install ventilation systems with heat and cool recovery. And this also cleans the intake air because the air is filtered. And there's something called thermal bridges. That means designing out places of excessive heat loss and gain right in the architecture. So you just design it smart from the beginning. And then let's eliminate drafts. Make the home as airtight, really airtight and really smoke tight. And when you do this, homes really don't need much energy to operate. And they especially don't need gas, none at all. So they're just a superior method, a superior kind of home for electrification. So what does a passive house look like? And now I'm going to turn it over to Brownyn, who is the real genuine passive house master here.
Well, thank you, Rob. That's very kind, and it's great to be with you all here this evening. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am presenting from my home in San Francisco. I live in the Mission, so not too far from you up north. I've been here in California for 35 years. I'm a graduate of Los Lomas High School in Walnut Creek, class of 86. So I am going to just give you a little background of my work and just Passive House as it relates to what's really going on in California. And these are 3 projects. They're all projects I've designed. They're here in the Bay Area. The first one's a retrofit of a kind of 50s modern. You've seen these building typologies. They're ubiquitous across California. This is it was kind of a colonial style home in Alamo, kind of more Central Valley, warmer climate. And this one is in Sunnyvale. And these 3 projects have been extensively monitored by everybody from the DOE and America Homes program. So I'm pretty fortunate to have a lot of data from my projects over the years. I have been working actively as an architect since 2007 and really absorbed and adopted Passive House because it gave me the tools, the targets, and the training I needed to be able to comfortably and confidently give my clients the standard of care and quality that I really wanted to make part of my own professional practice. So as a deliverable, I wanted to make sure that every time I designed a project, it was going to work really well, it was going to be super comfortable, and it was going to be super low energy. So that's what turned me on to Passive House. And I'll share this other project. This was a winner at the Architecture at Zero competition in 2022. It's an affordable multifamily development. It was designed for Visalia, California. So Central Valley, small sort of mid-size 4-plexes and 6-plexes designed all to Passive House. And unfortunately, this project hasn't got built yet, but I'm really hopeful that will happen. But really just want to show you some other typologies that I've been working on because this isn't just for single family homes. And another project I did for Sacramento, just sort of envisioning how we can build sort of 2- and 3-story buildings that fit within the same sort of suburban street context. The streetscape is down below here. You'll see it in my slides. These are actual real homes on the right here. This one here, you'll see again further on, but I really want to show people how we can put these buildings in regular neighborhoods and they fit beautifully and they do all the things that we need to help transform our building industry here in California. So next I'm going to show you, this is a very recently finished project. I finished this and designed this for a building analyst who works at the California Energy Commission in Sacramento. He wanted a certified Passive House. So this was actually, as this is a plus energy home, I built this. We reused a lot of the older existing home that he and his wife were living in, and we really modernized this home. It's designed as sort of a modern craftsman bungalow. And this has been a great experience in helping show builders, architects, policymakers all around Sacramento. We were able to use this house, it's the first certified Passive House in Sacramento, as a great catalyst for showing people what's possible. And you can see how we're using really all the techniques that Rob outlined, the 5 principles of Passive House. We got a really super airtight envelope, and then we added our overframe rafters overhead. On the left, these 2 slides are showing how we sealed all the penetrations, because air tightness and smoke tightness is of serious value. I think everybody now really understands why we have to build this way in California. And in the middle here, you see one of the crew from Good Space Builders who built this home, installing the ventilation system that allows all the air to be filtered as it comes in to this house. And the crew here, this was a BS and beer meeting that happened on the site. We opened it up for many open houses, and really it's showing not just one builder what's possible. He's embraced this, but I have the great honor to be working with a lot of builders building these projects all around California, and everyone, brings in other curious builders, policymakers, architects to show them how we can do this. And as you can see, this is a section of that house. It's got the 5 principles that Rob outlined for you. But what this delivers that our current Title 24 energy model doesn't is it's meticulous about the smoke tightness, and it requires blower door testing, which our current energy code currently still does not. It also requires careful attention to thermal bridging, which can literally waste at least 30 to 40% of a building's energy straight out the walls and these junctions that we never had to model until we did Passive House. And the last item, which Rob touched on, the climate data, the temperature, and the overheating limits. Passive houses have strict ceilings for what the indoor temperature can reach, and you can design that out from the get-go. But until you put that on the model and make a limit for it, it's not ever looked at. So these are really great superpower items that Passive House in California can really support our climate goals and what we really need to do for climate resilience and survival. So on the left here, I'm not going to go through all my projects. There's dozens and dozens of them all across California. The left-hand map shows a database that's being built on the Passive House cal.org website, showing a few of the projects. I actually have quite a number that I don't even have on this database, so I know there are lots more. That's what's showing here, but we're starting to collect them to make them visible. And then elsewhere in the country, so many of these are being built. And on the right here, I wanted to show you this very new building. It's still under construction. You can see the building on the right here, and it's part of this tower with a podium base block. This is being developed as one of dozens and dozens of these going up in New York. So this one's in Brooklyn. It has 1,000 residents, 200 of which are permanently affordable, 60,000 square foot of Class A office space, 50,000 square foot of retail, and 2 Passive House schools. And I wanted to tell you, this one building alone has more certified Passive House inside the one building than we have in the whole of California. So I have really wanted to change that number and get us caught up to all the fabulous action that's been happening across the country. Just to give you a sense, and we're digging into the policy and the strategy we're employing, but I want to tell you why we started to look at adding an alternate compliance pathway in to Title 24. Because As I said, I've been doing this for a long time. This is a project I'm working on in Redwood City. It's a retrofit, sort of a partial retrofit in a new build, has all the passive house features. And when it came to my permitting, here's my Title 24 performance numbers. Here are my passive house numbers in the middle. And the blue column is the sort of the baseline bare minimum that I have to build in California. And because I have to do a separate model for passive house that I have come to really trust and value for its accuracy, every time I submit these to my permit officials, they scratch their head and go, "What are you doing and why are you doing this?" Because it's different. And it doesn't quite fit in the same box as what they're used to, dealing with. And this code official made me put this graphic together so that I could compare them side by side, because he didn't believe that what we were doing was better. So it creates constant conflict between my Title 24 model and my passive house model. And I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritties. I've ranted online about this for many years, because there are always things in my passive house model that have not yet shown up in my Title 24 model. And we are continuously punished for doing better, which seems to be a bit of a problem. So we have really done a lot of work to get verified data to help show people at the CEC why we want to do this and why we should not be blocked from doing better. This again is the same house you saw in some of the earliest pictures, a nice 3-bed, 2-bath family home in Sunnyvale, California. I was able to monitor it for 2 years and get hourly data. This is January through December down the bottom. And the yellow line is the sipping energy that this house uses all through the year. And what's so remarkable about this is it barely goes up and down over this 500 kilowatt hours line. The blue line, the light blue line, is what my passive house energy model predicted. So we are actually way under, we're overperforming or underusing energy according to my model, which is, it's designed to be a conservative model. The dark blue line, I managed to be able to, through the utility, they publish the energy data, and this neighborhood happens to be a whole subdivision that was built post-war, all the same 3 house models, all the same footprint. So pretty good, accurate representation. And this is the average energy use for every home collectively in this neighborhood. And you can see where this home really overperforms is in the winter time. So the December, January, the cold months, my home is using 4.3 times less energy than every other home. And I could go through that data, but you get the message there. I was able to send the hourly data I collected for 2 of my projects, the one in Alamo you saw there and the Sunnyvale one, to the CPUC, and they hired a company that also had hourly data, energy use data for 5 ZNE homes, so zero net energy homes, much better than baseline code in the same climate zone. And they were able to use this data to compare my passive houses. So the red line are the passive houses and the blue line are the ZNE homes. And what they found in summer, these are the hourly months for June, July, August, the peak cooling months, my passive house project had no summer peak, which was even I was surprised by how significantly lower my project was, because passive houses have traditionally been considered champions for winter load reductions. And here my data proves in our warm climates, they are functioning as champions for summer load reductions. And the winter peaks, what my projects also were very similar to the Z&E projects, but with the big difference that it had a later winter ramp rate. So those of you familiar with grid dynamics, the ramp rates and the start times are really critical for utility and infrastructure development, particularly as we electrify and decarbonize. So there are my passive houses acting like superwoman across these climate zones and knocking the socks off the Z&E homes in the same climate zone. And I'm not the only one who's found this. A colleague of mine, Graham Irwin, whose company is Essential Habitat, he's been doing passive houses as long as I have up here. He did this study finding, how passive houses in this climate zone were able to, for every one code compliant building that you built in each of these climate zones, you could build, 6 passive houses in Sacramento would use the same amount of energy as one code compliant building. And you can see across California in the sort of milder climates like Oakland, San Jose, Santa Maria, the savings aren't quite as much, but in the more sort of hotter climates, Palmdale, Sacramento, San Diego, passive house is looking really good. And is really helpful for all the heat load, the brownouts, because where we get our brownouts in California is in heating season, right? I mean, cooling season, beg your pardon. This other report, which was issued last year, a consultant at Certifier based in Denver, Colorado, has been working with project teams across the U.S., and he collected data for 50 homes across the entire U.S., 11 of which were in California. And this map on the right here shows where they are. So northern and central, one in Tahoe, and then the rest of them sort of down your area and San Diego, LA region. And he compared the outcomes in the modeling software between California's Title 24 and the various passive house standards that we have available to us here in the US market. Finding again and again that passive house, the PHI version, has a couple of options, low energy building, and the classic are still significantly outperforming California's Title 24 for heating and cooling compared to the baseline standard. And when we looked at multifamily, a low-rise multifamily building for a study we were supporting CPUC on, we found in the climate zones where they predict most multifamily buildings will be built, which is climate zone 4, 14, and 7, and you can see exactly where they are geographically. Again, double-digit savings reductions, except for in climate zone 7, which is pretty mild San Diego area, in the total energy use, but significant in the heating, ventilation, and cooling energy use, up to 63% in climate zone 14, so that hot Central Valley area. And Rocky Mountain Institute has really released this study in terms of passive house resilience It was done for a cold Minnesota climate, but the function and the result for a hot, climate would be approximately the same, because what passive house does is allows you to keep the cool air in longer and keeps the heat or the heat out for longer during extended periods of utility shutdowns. And you can see on the top left here, this chart, the green line is the passive house building, which was able to remain habitable for much longer, and never went down below the 40-degree sort of cutoff of habitability. And this was for 168 hours, so 5 days of extended utility shutdown. So again, proving that we really have a resilience champion on our hands, that we are able to deliver this. So we've given you lots of data here, and I want to now bring it back to the policy narrative, because what we have found here in California is really being able to do this more regularly has been very hard. So what we did, we did a big research study, and we looked at who else was doing this and how are they managing to get more projects built that really supported industry transformation. And this started, the first region to actually really leverage passive house as a real tool to transform its entire building industry was actually Brussels. And they started in about 2004. And they put out a call for projects to submit to show them how they could do better. Brussels was actually one of the worst offenders in terms of buildings emissions in the whole of Europe, which was very embarrassing given that they were the headquarters for the EU. And they actually found they established a program that offered incentives, training, and a little bit of support, financial support for early adopter front-runner projects, all of which actually chose voluntarily to use passive house, which allowed them to repeat this program over 7 years. And it showed them that actually they could then mandate passive house or passive house targets in their baseline code. So in 7 years, they were able to, not only the yellow line is showing their population growth, they had a big growth in population. The blue line showed the employment rate also was improved. And the two red lines, which were dropping down, were total energy consumption dropped substantially, and so did their greenhouse gas emissions. So this period of time where they transformed industry and adopted passive house really allowed them to completely overhaul their building stock. So Massachusetts also learned of this program in Brussels, and they decided to implement a very similar program. Massachusetts put together an incentive program that offered training to professionals, incentives for energy modeling their projects to passive house, and then a little bit of support, financial support for the front-runner projects to allow them to cover the cost differential for new. And this has actually, in the 8 years they've been doing it, allowed them also, there are now 21 municipal districts in Massachusetts that now require certified multifamily require passive house certification for all of their multifamily buildings. And they have transformed their entire baseline code to mimic passive house. Vancouver did a very similar thing. They also heard about Brussels and they said, oh, okay, we could do those things. We can remove the barriers that make this easier. We can add incentives and we can develop our own. Vancouver now has the largest portfolio of certified passive house city-owned buildings in Canada. So you see the general trend and we see the pattern. And not only has Vancouver done this, New York is doing this. You obviously that building that I showed you in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, beg your pardon, didn't come out of nowhere. And there are dozens of these going up all across New York and Massachusetts and the Western states. So how do we replicate this in California? And how do we get more of this here? So we put together a sort of a development roadmap. We did all the research. We inventoried where the projects were, and we mapped this all out. We created this was a paper we presented at ACEEE at the Grand Poobah Policy Conference of the Northern North America. We put a pitch documentation that gives all the reasons why. And then we created an action plan. And lo and behold, the pathway was very simple. This replicates the exact pathway that Brussels, Massachusetts, New York, Vancouver have all done this. And it's really simple. And not only does it support passive house, but this is how we transform our entire building industry. So the first step was alternate compliance pathway. Get the road, get the barriers out the way. And then you get incentives in place. And we actually could spend another whole program on that. Then you add stretch and reach codes that help support the front runners a little further. And then you come back and you just transform your entire baseline code because everybody already knows how to do this. Which is where I get to hand this back to Rob to tell you more about how we're starting on step one here in California. So take it away, Rob.
Yeah, so my input here is very simple because the bill is very simple. Just let's go ahead. Yeah. So what we've mentioned this before. It's AB 368. The author is Assemblyman Christopher Ward, and the essence of the bill language is in the white text. That's all it is. It provides an alternative compliance pathway in Title 24 for passive house, and that is subject to the California Energy Commission evaluation. And that's the essence of the bill language. That's what it says. And it can do that because passive house already has a defined set of criteria and these standards. And below this, though, just to kind of round out what this does is it's as Brownyn has been saying. So in the gray text, this, if we provide this, if we have a law like this, that will eliminate obstacles and hurdles and extra fees that are now present into building climate-safe structures, homes, and multifamily buildings. It'll also help, from all the data we've seen, it'll also help with affordable multifamily housing because, I mean, it's one small step, but those occupants of those buildings will have much lower utility bills. And so that, that goes a long ways to helping people, be, and their end of month being positive in their budget. This passive house standard, it'll help California meet its greenhouse gas emission goals, as we've discussed. and built at scale, if we get a large number of adoptions, that will help to modernize the transmission grid. And Bronwyn touched on this. Because there's such low demand of passive house, and if you have a large number of houses like this, that means it won't be necessary to build so many new transmission towers to bring in, solar from the desert and where else. We'll be able to put more solar on rooftops and actually help in a more significant way, meeting our local demand. And of course, doing all of this with an optional compliance pathway, it sets an example for California's building industry to follow. It shows that this is not, hokum, and that it's real, and that it can produce high quality buildings. So that's the bill we have, and that's what we want to see passed in our, fervently. So this is Chris Ward. He's adopted. He's now pushing for AB 368, and please help us support this building industry transformation. I mean, this will be really significant. It's a little bit like flying under the radar, okay? It's nothing like polluters pay or any of these very grandiose and admirable bills. But this one can have a significant effect because it's something that everybody does, we live somewhere, and it, as it filters through the whole state, this can really help draw down our emissions. So you can go to this QR code. That takes you to our campaign website, and you can sign up there if you'd like to join our and help us further these goals. So thank you very much. And I guess we can have some Q&A now.
And thank you both for that. The data is very compelling for those of us who live in the valley, where we are certainly subject to extreme heat in the summer. So seeing, the steadiness of those curves through the hot summer months, and any of us who've ever gotten that August LADWP bill can certainly appreciate why it might be a huge benefit to be able to level that out. We have a ton of questions, so we're going to just kind of dive right in and start asking you things, if that's okay, and feel free to jump back and forth for who answers what as you wish. I'm going to start with a question from Judith Trumbo. Can you speak to the upfront cost differential for passive house versus conventional building? So that's going to be an obvious question. How much more expensive is it to build like this?
Sure, and I can give you direct numbers for my projects. We found it's about 3 to 4% more expensive.
Is that all? 3 to 4%?
Yep, just change. And I actually have compared a lot of my projects to similar custom homes in the Bay Area, and my projects actually come in at much lower overall cost per square foot than standard custom homes. And honestly, the 3 to 4%, you could spend that money in choosing a higher end floor finish material. So there's no substantial cost reason for not building passive house. And the biggest hurdle is really education. Understanding how to do this smarter and how to bake it in from the start, rather than try and bolt it on as a afterthought, which is why I've spent a huge amount of my career building the Passive House Network to provide training for my peers in the industry, because if you don't learn how to do it, you just make it harder and more expensive, and it doesn't have to be.
Okay, so that brings me kind of right to someone else's question. So Jeannie wanted to know, how did you learn how to design passive house? Was there, special training that you went through? But what I'm also wondering is what about construction workers? Do they need new skills to do this? All the way down the line, from the architect to the person who's actually, putting the pieces together, what sort of additional training is going to be needed?
Sure, and I've put up a slide. I hope I'm still screen
Yes, I
sharing.
can see
I'm
that.
still there.
This is why this is industry transformation, and it has to happen completely vertically, and it's got to all connect. And we recognize that industry transformation starts with education. You got to start with the professionals, the design professionals, the engineers, the energy modelers. Then you've got to get to the tradespeople, contractors, the people who actually put these things together. And what we also found is you actually have to get to the policymakers because they also have to understand this. And it all has to connect. And it's the thing that I have really, what really converted me to Passive House was it's the first approach to building that brought everybody to the table, where I had to be coordinating with as the architect. I always was working with my structural engineer and my builder and my client and my energy modeler and my HVAC guy. All of us had to be singing from the same hymn book. And Passive House does that. You all get, once you understand the 5 principles and you learn how to deliver this, it's remarkable how excited everybody gets because there's a rationale to why you're doing something. Everything has a physics-based, science-backed, reason that you can go, wow, okay, that makes so much sense. And nobody ever told it to, explained it to me that way before. So it's a real unifying approach to building design.
And so how are you going to reach the people lower down in the chain?
So we have been offering and building out the training infrastructure and the training network. Every project is a great teaching opportunity, but we do have training in place. We've been working with PG&E, SoCal Edison, 3C Ren. We are getting this information out there and we're getting this training into the workforce. But it's a big job. So we're making all the strategic moves. We've got the policy roadmap laid out. We also have some incentive programs coming online through the Rebuild program, the Rise Homes program. It's not been released yet, but all the folks in the LA fires were really pushing the CPUC really hard to hurry up and release that program. But they'll be offering $20,000 and $30,000 to homeowners rebuilding to Passive House.
Okay, so that's great to hear. We had questions in the chat about whether you were reaching out to, people in Altadena, people in Palisades, to make people aware that this is an option.
We've been, so if you go to passivehousenetwork.org or passivehousecal.org, there are lots of resources being put together, fire rebuilds, resilience rebuilds, how to access the professionals. But we're still, honestly, it's capacity building. We've got a lot of work to do here in California to get our entire building industry even understanding what is a smoke-tight building and why. I mean, everybody understands now why we want that, but the deliverable of how to get there is something that we are working tirelessly to try and, get in place. It's certainly not easy, and but policy like AB 368 sends a very clear signal to the marketplace that yes, we want to support this, and yes, we want to remove barriers to folks who want to do this, because it's not easier than minimum code, but there is a massive backlog in demand for how to do this. And honestly, I'm getting calls from folks in Pasadena and Palisades. I mean, we've been getting them since Paradise, Santa Rosa, CZU fires in Santa Cruz. Honestly, California is, every project I do has to be fire resilient. And it kind of breaks my heart that we aren't already requiring this in our code for all these folks, because this isn't the last fire we're going to see in California.
Yes, and I presume that when you say smoke tight, it's also ember tight.
Exactly. It's all
so-
connected.
Do you have modeling at all on, fire survival rates of these houses?
We don't have enough of them. We have data from projects, passive houses. So passive house isn't just only happening in California. It's happening everywhere. And Australia, actually, who's also had very similar, bushfires, Canada, their fires, we've got data from those regions with really compelling information for how the passive house buildings were able to really not only withstand, but sort of remain completely habitable because they had been built smoke tight and amber tight.
Okay. Zena,
Susan, if I could just,
go
Sharon,
ahead.
if I could just,
Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up with the other part of your other question about, or the audience question about reaching out to Altadena and Palisades. So there is actually a program underway right now where we're Resilient Palisades and the Altadena Recovery Team. These are two groups operating in each of their areas, and they've now been connected, and these two groups are both trying to spread the word of electrification and passive house. We're not suggesting that everybody will have to build back passive house, but we are certainly putting it out there to all and every listener.
It would be great if everyone just knew what the options were. Your data is convincing. If people see it,
Yeah.
I think that they'll want that, as long as, there are ways to make it available.
Yeah. That's right. It's just a
Speaking
matter
of availability, Zena wants to know if there are any special building materials that have to be used to do this, or is it all just the same conventional building materials that are already being used?
So for the most part, we now actually do have all the products that we need to build these. Really, for a long time, we have been importing, high performance windows, because our window manufacturers were just producing code compliant windows and not quite passive house level. Air tightness products, honestly, you'd think those would be readily available in California, but they haven't. And we've slowly been building, supply chains to get these here. So for the most part, yes, the stuff is now available, but as the demand grows, the price comes down. We've seen this with everything, and passive house is no different. So, yeah.
All right. So this is all super inspiring for people who are, building a new home from scratch, but most of us already live in houses. So we want to know about retrofits. What if you don't have the money to, do your entire house down to the studs and start fresh? What if you only have enough to do one project? What would you start with? How would you go about doing that?
Rob, how about you take that one? I've yacked enough.
Sure. Well, the short answer is that there is a program through the Passive House Institute for doing retrofitting. I mean, it's a rigorous sort of plan that takes you step by step through that process. So it can be done. It is being done. I mean, Bronwyn even pointed out a couple of her earlier projects were retrofits. But the answer, what everyone wants to know, is what will that cost? And there's just no simple way to answer that it is more expensive to retrofit your house up to Passive House standard than to do a cheaper retrofit. Because it means because you're going back in and trying to undo somebody else's mistakes from long ago, or you're trying to, fit in what was done long ago. So there is just more hands-on. It's not that Passive House itself is more expensive. It's the retrofit job itself, which is more expensive than say even than just a simple construction job. So that the Passive House premium is not any higher than what Bronwyn was saying for a retrofit, on the order of 3-4%. But it's the actual task of going through and upgrading that house that does bring a significant expense. So generally the industry says that you do not embark on a retrofit unless you're going to do it anyways, unless there's some other reason, some other compelling reason you have to completely remodel your house. Then if you're going to do that, then by all means upgrade to a Passive House.
And what I would add there, the Passive House standard for retrofits is called ENERPHIT, ENERPHIT, and you can do a phased ENERPHIT. So you can, when your roof needs replacing, that's the time when you add a bit more insulation and you put in an air-sealed barrier that you can, when your siding then needs replacing, you can connect the air barrier or the roof to the siding. Or when your windows need replacing, that's when you add those things. So you replace only when the item has reached its end of life anyway. And you just make sure that you don't replace with something that wouldn't ever, that you don't want to add a sunk cost. You don't want to do something that's a half-baked job. So it's structured to allow retrofits, but retrofits are definitely hard. And what we say is we should start with allowing this alternate compliance pathway so that our industry can build skills, capacity, and a product supply chain, because all of those will make retrofits easier and cheaper.
Maureen is asking whether this has any impact on your house insurance. Are there any differences in, the insurance or the mortgage or any of the other, aspects of a new house?
So I can answer that. From my clients, none of them have told me this has been beneficial or detrimental to their insurance. This actually should lower your insurance premium because you make, a better quality building. The certification and the verification makes sure that, not just the airtightness, but the waterproofing and the connections and the details are all done really well. And I have to say, I hadn't done certified projects for a number of years because I worked with a builder and I was pretty confident. I worked with the same builder for almost a decade. And since he retired, I now highly encourage my clients to do certification. And I have been shocked, inspired, and really uh, you know, impressed by how rigorous the certification is and how it really delivers the quality that everybody would want and that we should be getting anyway, but our inspection process just doesn't have the bandwidth or capacity, or most of the stuff just isn't on their radar. So the insurance companies should be like throwing money at people to do passive house.
Right.
But
I mean, it should be
not
better
yet.
for everyone, right?
Not yet. We'll get there though.
All right. Well, we are almost out of time. So the very last question I'm going to ask you guys from Polly is, how did you convince Assemblymember Ward to sponsor this? And, you know, what kind of support have you already kind of felt from, you know, the legislators, or what kind of resistance are you getting?
Do you want me to take that?
Please, Rob, you know all the details.
Yeah, so I think Assemblymember Ward was perhaps a little bit sensitized to housing issues since he was the chair of the Housing Committee last year. But it was just a matter of talking with them, meeting with them, explaining the benefits as Brownyn and I have just gone over, the principles, the benefits, the small cost premium and the benefit, you know, and then the subsequent payback over the years. So yeah, they were just that's how we can, you know,
And don't we have
Assemblyman
more senators and assemblymen wanting to jump in to co-author now? It's been
right. So we've been on the co-author hunt for a few weeks now, and we've met with a number of them who have expressed very sincere desire to be a co-author. They haven't actually committed to it yet, but they've shown a very big a lot of interest. So that's where we're standing with the sort of the stance of the bill right now. There are many. We haven't met any legislator who has pushed back. Every legislator that we've talked to has indicated that this is a great idea. Now, they may have other priorities and they're not going to pursue this, but that's there hasn't been anyone that has rained on our parade.
That's really good to hear. If you're not getting, you know, organized pushback, that alone is a good sign.
The one pushback we are getting from kind of in an organized way is from labor. And it's not the entire umbrella organization of labor, but it's curiously, or it seemed odd to me at the time, it's the pipe fitters union. And because the pipe fitters union is against passive house, then they kind of it's all for one and one for all in the kind of the labor the state labor organization. So they're not in favor of this. And the reason the pipe fitters are against this is because this is such a clear way to electrify a house. You do not. It's uneconomical to run a gas line into these passive houses simply because all the energy saving, the very low energy needs, and so you can meet that with running an electric line in there. You just don't have to run a gas line. So it's simply not cost effective, and so the pipe fitters don't like that because it's going to eliminate jobs.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
We've got lots of other good jobs for them with air sealing and grade insulation and ventilation systems installation, and we can get them retrained in no time.
It's a shift, not a loss, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Rob and Brownyn, I want to thank you so much for being here with us tonight. If you're willing to put your emails in the chat for people who have further questions, there may be some folks who want to, you know, reach out to you directly, or, you know, people who know friends and family who've lost their homes may want to be able to connect, you know, them with you as well. And at this point, I think pretty much everyone in LA knows someone who has lost their home. So there's no shortage of clients. For those of you who had further questions, we do encourage you to reach out to our speakers directly via email after the meeting. As always, the YouTube channel will have the recording of this meeting in about a week or so. And at this moment, I would like to invite you all to unmute and thank our speakers with a round of applause. This has been an extremely informative evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Really nice.
Terrific. I
Thank
learned
you.
a lot.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time and expertise on this topic.
We hope to help you pass this bill.
And we will be sharing the action alert to get that bill passed this year. We're all going to be needing to contact our legislatures and express our support, especially those of us who, are in the fire zones and are seeing this firsthand.
Wonderful. Yeah, we appreciate that. We can use everybody's help. We certainly welcome it.
Thank you, everybody.